Hello again, this is UML Operator. Hello and welcome back. In this episode, we're going to be going over the Sparx 17 release notes. It's been out for a week. I want to say over a week for us, but we've gone through over 370 lines of updates. We've run over 180 test cases, which is up from 151 that we normally run on major releases from Sparx. And I gotta say, this is an awesome release. Thank you, Sparx. Of course, we recommend that you go through the Sparx sale. I always call this the sales page. Go through the changes and updates they did here. Familiarize yourself with the sales jargon before you jump into the release notes for version 17. All right. So as you go through each one of these, you're going to highlight ones that are specifically interesting to you, as we did, and how I will show you. The next thing is when you go to the Help Center, your team is probably going to start with the application desktop and the ribbon menu. All right. Learn how to navigate Sparx. I've taught you how to change the version number here to 16.1 or whatever version you're on in a separate tab so that you're able to do some comparisons on their help jargon. All right. When you're done with that, you're probably going to go down to modeling fundamentals and then go through some of the basic features and aspects of Sparx to understand what they've done in version 17. These are my typical wishes and concerns, so I'm not going to go through those, but I am going to touch on my favorites, and hopefully throughout this video, I'm highlighting my favorites. We'll do other videos on these after this as we go forward. But number one is they corrected a major bug I reported almost 2 years ago. That was fixed. The timeline feature is absolutely amazing. The visual guides showing up and snapping, the smart placement, amazing. New drag and drop feature, there were so many new updates, quality of life aspects for productivity and delivery. This was a great release. So again, let's jump into it so we're not spending too much time talking. And here we go. There were a ton of changes around data warehousing and updates, and this is very useful. There was MDG updates, the tooling that was provided for us to do modeling, referencing other data technologies, especially in the data warehouse area. It was just very productive. Would be very interested in your feedback on how you felt about data warehousing. We have a series coming up on data warehousing where we'll do more demos pertaining to the tooling that has been applied in version 17. The updates for import data were a perfect add at this time, especially when we're talking about cloud. The ability to bring in our data sources from Snowflake and other data sources was a huge productivity gain for us. Next is perspectives. New technology model perspectives introduce support for modeling and publishing perspective sets. Updates to the layout of the perspective set dialog were amazing. Added model-based ribbon sets for start perspectives and settings, shared model sets, added the ability to copy and share perspectives for personal sets. And we'll do more demos on this as we move forward in Sparx 17. Next is timelines. This was a huge game changer for us. Before Sparx 17, we did baseline, save images, create reports, and expose differences in a much harder way. So a new docking station allowed us to do baselines, do snapshots, be able to view as we're collaborating in real time. This was a huge quality of life update in Sparx 17. Next is the comparison window. This area for us was mostly relevant to timelines, the new feature, time-aware modeling, and what we were doing there. The ability to look at snapshots and do compares bases using the older way of doing baselines and compares was far more productive. especially when it came to real-time collaboration and delivery. Here we're using the timeline feature to do a compare and then go back and forth with the team to understand what changed over a period of time. The ability to edit notes was also a great add. So when you're making these baselines, being able to see those notes is extremely productive, especially when you're working across various teams. Next is smart placement. And again, this was a huge quality of life game changer for us. The ability to be able to very quickly manage your models, because we're constantly just dumping elements into a screen and then we've got to clean them up to meet a deadline so that the models make sense. This was extremely productive for us. And the tooling here, very powerful in its ability for you to align just about any element in any situation for your modeling needs. Another quality of life improvement was moving some of the drop-down menus to checkboxes. This makes it a lot easier and more extensible in configuring what you're trying to do within your modeling experience. Next is external data integration. This was more applicable to the data warehouse, the need to import data from our data warehouse sources, such as Snowflake and Teradata and Redshift, and so on. When we get into external data integration for SBPI, we'll talk more about this subject relevant to third-party providers that we're integrated with. I have chapters down below if you want to jump ahead to that particular section. Next is documentation, and there were a lot of updates, enhancements, and fixes for documentation. So I'm just going to cover a couple of them that are important. Dynamic documentation. They changed in the tooling here, a couple of references and names that we see here. And they were probably good changes to be made because we can very quickly get to things that we need to do. However, we do a lot of web reporting, so this particular change was rather important to us. The quality of images got better with of course, a size change. The ability to take journal entries at a particular and build reports was extremely powerful for us. So we'll be demoing a lot more of that as we're going forward. Next is profile authoring, and this seemed to be more applicable to MDG fixes and enhancements. And we do some MDG. However, this version of Sparx will replace some of that. But the ability to do traceability in our storytelling was extremely important update for us. Next is user interface. And you can see there was a lot of updates to user interface, and we're just going to touch on a few of them. The first is Model Builder. They made this much easier. You can actually get to it right from the browser. It's no longer on the start page. The next is the ability to manage properties for your navigation cells right from the browser. The next was dealing with assemblies when you're in component diagrams. The property box is back, and thanks very much, Sparx, for bringing that back. Makes it much easier. Just as we talked about before with the drop-down menus, now traceability can be configured using the checkbox, and this makes it far better and more productive in managing traceability. We're going to be doing a lot of UI demonstrations as we're going forward in this channel. Next is automation and scripting, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We've got a series coming up soon on automation. We're just going to touch on the subject. Most of these were relevant to fixes and minor enhancement. Well, some people are going to think they're major enhancements, especially relevant to MDG, but we'll get to that very soon. Next is reviews and discussions, and there are two major items I wanted to touch on, and that's number one, that the manage reviews windows was updated, and we're going to be doing sessions on project management and reviews coming up in our model-driven anything series, so we'll get to that then. However, the main feature update here was around Journal and My Diary. Comments in general that there's some report templates that are available that help us report on Journal, My Diary, comments, and so on. Next is visual styles and themes. And I talked about this in the ribbons, but they added in Microsoft Office 2022. And I'm really liking the theme. However, I moved from colorful to dark gray for my tired eyes. And then I have my own diagram themes down here, but that are between my own theme, which is running now, or tired eyes. So if I apply that, it just changes the background color. So I have less brightness in my face, especially late at night when I'm working. Next is simulation. There were only 2 changes here. We'll get more into this, especially when we get into SysML parametric simulation. And that's going to be a session kind of far away on our queue. So the biggest thing was that the trigger and event can now have different name for triggers and parameters. So if you're doing simulation, especially in state machines, that might be an interesting change for you. Next is execution analyzer, and we're going to skip over this one. 6 of the 7 points were interesting to us, especially dealing with 64-bit applications. Trace points can now view static variables. So when we get into coding, code editing, code-driven, model-driven code is what I want to say, we'll talk more about this subject. Next is diagramming, and this was the most important one to us because what are we doing when we're modeling? We're diagramming. You can see there's a lot of changes that are here, and we mostly were focused on, let me get back to my model here. We mostly were focused on these. The ability to drag and drop functionality, wow, huge. So let's just get into a couple of these as we're going forward. So now you can drag and drop an element onto a line and have it insert the 2 associations. This was a big game changer. Another one was with custom draw elements, you can flood fill to indicate percentages complete. This was another game changer for us in modeling, especially in PowerPoint presentations, and you can automate driving these outcomes. They added a new diagram option to show standard bookmarks, and this added to properties as well to allow hiding standard bookmarks on elements. So anyone that uses bookmarks, this is an extremely powerful add, and we'll get more into using bookmarks, managing bookmarks, and how they're useful in delivering your projects. The next one I don't find that exciting, but it deals with hiding private inherited features. So when we're in here, we have the ability now in our objects to do this. This next one deals with the assembly relationship now available from the quick linker menu when adding a connector between components. Good timing on this one as we're getting ready to get into data warehousing, and they've added the Azure icons for 2024. They also added the AWS icons for release 19. So there's a lot more to cover for diagramming, a lot of cool updates and things that are going to be very important to us as modelers. And we'll cover those in future videos because we're using Sparx version 17 in all of our videos going forward. The next is model import export, and we're going to skip over this one. There were 2 important points out of the list they had in the release notes, and that dealt with native connections to Linux based on MySQL 8, which was a concern, as well as updates to XMI, the round trip of journals and discussions. We're still doing testing on that one, so we'll get back to you as we're going forward. All right, we're back to external data interchange, especially dealing with SBPI, and we're going to be getting into integrating with third parties. We have clients that use Jira Align from Atlassian. They use Bugzilla, and they use other platforms. So the ability to integrate around a subject known as Open Services for Lifecycle Collaboration, OSLC, that's a mouthful. We'll get more into this as we progress in this channel. So Sparx 17 was huge when it came to external data integration. Whether we're talking about the data warehouse subject and bringing in data from our external data sources, or putting our data into those data sources. So dealing with third parties is a huge game changer. We've done sessions on importing flat files into Elements and then going round trip back. We've built databases and our own tooling to do this. And now Sparx has cut most of that out and really saving us a lot of time. Last but certainly not least is other changes. And a lot of people skip over this section, but the biggest one was the ability to create local Sparx project instances without having to worry about SQL setup or ProCloud or any of that. You can set up a secure local instance, put it on a shared drive, set up your access constraints for various users. It's just, this was such a wonderful add for us if we have a local file share that we want to work on an NDA project or a secure product realization release or those kind of things. So this was an excellent add. Thank you very much, Sparx, for this one. Certainly a lot of other things to cover in the other changes, but I'll do that in a later session. All right, that's going to wrap up this short version of a Sparx 17 release note walkthrough. Typically, these sessions can take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to go through. I'm not sure I'm going to make a video that long. I'll save you all from that. But we covered a lot of material. We went through this entire list, each section. There are 18 sections. Some of them could have been folded into one, but we got through it, and that's a good thing. And let's see here. What else do we need to do to close up? I'm looking over at our queue. Wow, we've got a lot to cover. A lot going on. Sparx 17 was very exciting, so it interrupted the queue. We're still going to be working on data warehousing. We started with modeling graph-oriented databases. We're going to get into some other NoSQL modeling. Typically, UML is used for structured aspects of architecture, object-oriented design, object-oriented architecture, and so on. So SQL is a perfect match for that. When you get into NoSQL, it gets a little bit tricky. However, Sparx 17 has really opened it up for us to be able to move into other areas that were a little bit more difficult for us to achieve before. So this was a great release. We have a new playlist series coming out for beginners. It's going to be My First is what the playlist is going to be called. My First Class Diagram, move through the various UML diagrams, and then my first time doing certain things in Sparx. So try to keep those videos under 10 minutes. 5 minutes is the target, and we'll see how that goes. But otherwise, we've got a lot going on around artificial intelligence and modeling on that. Sorry, I can't show you our queue. Putting use cases to work. Some folks have asked for some focus on that. Let's see here. There's some other things coming up, and it's going to be Sparx 17 as we're going through. However, don't go to Sparx 17 or any major software release until you've properly acclimated. We had a couple of teams this past week that jumped to Sparx 17 a little early, and it cost them project time. So it took literally a week out of their project time, added a week to the project. So be very careful. Hopefully our videos are helping. Hopefully this walkthrough helped you get started on what you want to do. Please comment down below any questions or concerns or challenges. I'm always looking for challenges, so put those in there. So until the next episode, happy modeling.